President Abraham Lincoln ghost stories. There are many ghost stories associated with Abraham Lincoln. Most revolve around his time in the White House, his assassination at Ford's Theater, and his death in the Peterson house across the street. There are many people who claim to have seen the ghost of Abraham Lincoln in the White House, at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., in his home state of Illinois, particularly his law office, the homes he lived in Springfield, Illinois, and the ghost train that carried the body of Abraham Lincoln after his assassination to various states. Abraham Lincoln even dreamed of his own death, and he told his friend. Ward Hill Lamon, a close friend of the president's, wrote down what Lincoln told him on an evening in early 1865. "About 10 days ago I retired very late," the president told Lamon. "I soon began to dream. There seemed to be a death-like stillness about me. Then I heard subdued sobs as if a number of people were weeping. I thought I left my bed and wandered downstairs. I arrived at the East Room. Before me was a catafalque, on which rested a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments. Around it were stationed soldiers who were acting as guards. And there was a throng of people, some gazing mournfully upon the corpse whose face covered, others weeping pitifully. 'Who is dead in the White House?' I demanded of one of the soldiers. 'The president,' was his answer. 'He was killed by an assassin.'" Additionally, Lincoln had visions of his own death. Tragedy haunted Lincoln's life. It is true that tragedy had stalked Lincoln long before his first presidential term. His beloved mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, died when her son was 9. When Lincoln's first love, Anne Rutledge, died of typhoid fever, he lapsed into a melancholy that may have led to his emotional breakdown a few years later. In 1842, at the age of 33, Lincoln married Mary Todd, but the union was not a particularly happy one. Mary had a mercurial temperament and a strong belief in the supernatural. It was her influence that led to her husband's interest in spiritualism, though he always regarded it with some skepticism. The Lincolns had 4 sons, but only Robert Todd lived to adulthood. Edward died at age 4, and young Willie died in the White House of typhoid at age 11. Tad died at 18, after his father's death. Lincoln was shattered by Willie's death and often visited the crypt where the child was buried. He would sit for hours, weeping copiously. At Mrs. Lincoln's urging, seances were held at the White House with the hope of communicating with their dead sons. The results of these seances were not entirely satisfying, and it's believed that Lincoln attended only 2 of them. Mary Todd Lincoln became a figure of controversy and criticism during her time in the White House. After her husband's assassination and the deaths of 3 of her children, she suffered great grief. She never recovered from her husband's murder. For a few years, she lived in England with her youngest son Tad. After returning to America, Tad Lincoln died and his mother's behavior became alarming to her oldest son Robert Todd, who took legal action to have her declared insane. A court placed her in a private sanatorium, but she went to court and was able to have herself declared sane. People who claimed to have seen sightings of Lincoln's ghost in the White House included the following. Grace Coolidge, wife of Calvin Coolidge, the 30th president, was the first person to report having actually seen the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. She said he stood at a window of the Oval Office, hands clasped behind his back, gazing out over the Potomac, perhaps still seeing the bloody battlefields beyond. The ghost of Lincoln was seen frequently during the administration of Franklin D. Roosevelt, when the country went through a devastating depression, then a world war. Prime Minister Winston Churchill and former President Dwight D. Eisenhower both claimed to have felt Lincoln's presence many times. Lady Bird Johnson believed she'd felt Lincoln's presence one spring evening while watching a television program about his death. She noticed a plaque she'd never seen before hanging over the fireplace. It mentioned Lincoln's importance in that room in some way. Mrs. Johnson admitted feeling a strange coldness and a decided sense of unease. When Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands was a guest at the White House during that period, She was awakened one night by a knock on her bedroom door. Thinking it might be an important message, she got up and opened the door. The top-hatted figure of President Lincoln stood in the hallway. The Queen fainted. When she came to, she was lying on the floor. The apparition had vanished. Eleanor Roosevelt used Lincoln's bedroom as her study. Although she denied seeing the former president's ghost, she admitted to feeling his presence whenever she worked late at night. She thought he was standing behind her, peering over her shoulder. Today, stories of a ghostly President Lincoln wandering the corridors and rooms of the White House still persist, but are not officially acknowledged.